Oral questions, questions orales. The honour member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, there's snow on the ground and it's pretty cold in the capital, and Canadians from coast to coast are putting up Christmas trees. But the finance minister is stuck in fantasy land, somehow still thinks it's fall. She's weeks behind on delivering the fall economic statement to this House and to Canadians. The parliamentary budget officer says that this minister blew past her deficit reduction targets, adding more inflationary spending and crippling debt that Canadians will have to pay. But we don't know for sure because she's nowhere to be found. So when will the finance minister tell Canadians just how much money she spent?
The honourable minister.
Madam Speaker, we look forward to answering our colleagues' questions, but I do feel it's important to recognize the gravity of this day. It is the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, and 35 years ago, 14 women's lives were cut short in a brutal act of violence at l'École Polytechnique, killed simply because they were women. Gender-based violence must not be tolerated in this country, and we all have a role to play in ending it.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, Conservatives on this side of the House stand in solidarity with all of the victims' families on this tragic day. My question, however, was about the finance minister and the fact that she is hiding today. She's hiding. She hasn't hidden the fact that she's doubled Canada's debt. She gave us the highest inflation in 40 years, and she delivered the lowest projected growth of any advanced economy. Right. She's trying to hide the truth for Canadians. So I will ask once again, if she doesn't want to come clean, can anybody on that side of the House tell us exactly how much Canada's deficit is this year?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, we'll put our record up against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sundays. Let me quote from a former governor of the Bank of Canada, David Dodge. He said, because it was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit over fiscal years 2011 and 12 through 2015, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower, rather more muted recovery. So while Conservatives slowed down our recovery, we have accelerated our post-pandemic recovery and are now on track to have the highest growth rate in the G7. That's in addition to Canadian work.
Honourable member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, if that minister wants to put his money where his mouth is, he should call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide. The finance minister, however, is going to have to find another job after the next election, and maybe she'll find out that you can't turn in your work that's been overdue. It's something that we learn in grade school, and she must have skipped that day. Her government lost control of our borders. They've lost control of immigration. They've clearly lost control of the deficit too, and they're trying to cover up their tracks. So I will ask again for those in the back, and I will say it slower, what is Canada's deficit this year?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Let's just review, Madam Speaker, the Conservative track record on affordability. So they will not support feeding hungry kids healthy meals at school. 400,000 more kids, they say, no, we don't want to feed you. They will not support a GST break over the holidays on food, toys, and other essentials over the holidays. They say, no, we won't support a GST cut for Canadians. They also won't lift a finger to fight climate change, which is cited in the report as being the greatest driver of food price inflation. When will they get on side with Canadians and actually support?
L'honorable député de Lévis-Lotbinière.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, the Liberals have not even tabled an economic statement this fall. The parliamentary budget officer was very clear. Our 2023-24 financial audits have not even been tabled. It's a historic lack of transparency in the history of our country. Canadians deserve to know how high the deficit is for this fiscal year ending on March 31st, 2024.
Merci, Madame Présidente. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. As he very well knows, our government has been investing to increase the number of jobs throughout the country. And today, there is some good news. There are 51,000 new jobs for Canadians.
It's going to help grow the economy, that's going to help transition into a modern economy, that's going to build the homes Canadians need, and importantly, provide the support to the families who are dealing with a higher cost of living. It's a shame that the Conservatives, every step of the way, oppose these measures.
L'honorable député de Lévis-Lapinière.
The Honourable Member. Madam Speaker, twice this government voted to keep this bad government in place. And yet, this government doesn't even seem to be able to cap its inflationary deficit at $40 billion, which is leading to an increase of $800 in grocery costs for the average family in 2025. Which means that now children are having to ask Santa for basic necessities of life. Canadians want to know, how high will this inflationary deficit be? The Honourable Minister.
C'est difficile.
Honestly, it's very difficult to accept this question when this very week the member had an opportunity to vote to reduce taxes on food, but he voted against that. He will have in the near future another opportunity to vote on programs for school lunch programs throughout the country. I wonder if he's going to vote against that once again. Madam Speaker, in this House, we need to support families and communities. But at every possible opportunity, the Conservative Party votes against that. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, the National Assembly of Quebec has unanimously asked the federal government to repeal the religious exception in the Criminal Code, which enables hate speech to be proffered on the basis of faith. Religion is no excuse for hate. We might think that everyone agrees about that, but on Wednesday, the Liberals blocked a motion to defend that simple principle. And yet, the Minister of Justice says that he wants to fight hate speech. So what does he have to say to his colleagues who want the federal government to protect religious extremists who are inciting violence? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Inaudible for the interpreter. Madam Speaker, what I can say is that on this side of the House, we are for any effort to fight hate, especially the increase in anti-Semitism that we're seeing in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. We want to work together to improve a piece of legislation that's already in this House. Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, we're very happy to work with the Bloc to improve and pass that bill. The Honourable Member. Well, the National Assembly of Quebec wants to get rid of this religious exception, but in Ottawa, there are some MPs who want to protect hate speech and the religious exception. In Quebec, we're defending social peace and solidarity, but in Ottawa, some want to sow division and violence. In Quebec, we defend secularism, but in Ottawa, some people are defending the right to commit crimes in the name of religion. This is ridiculous. Religion is no excuse for crimes. What is so hard to understand about that? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, on this side of the House, we have a national strategy to fight hate, as well as Bill C-63, which addresses online radicalization, where many of these problems begin. And then after that online radicalization, we often see real-life hate and crimes. We also know that this bill, our online harms bill, will address the same section of the criminal code as the one referenced by the Bloc Québécois bill, and we're happy to work with them on this.
De Burnaby Sud.
Liberals and Conservatives have a choice. Will they support Canadians in real cost of living relief, or will they just keep letting Canadians get ripped off? The NDP is forcing a vote in this House to permanently scrap the GST off of all family essentials and have the rebate be extended to seniors and students and people with disabilities. It's time for Canadians to come first, not the profits of ultra-rich corporations. So will the government support our plan, the NDP plan to help Canadians put food on the table and keep a roof over their head?
I just want to say I introduced the honourable member as a different riding, so it's New Westminster Burnaby. I'll correct that in the record. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's great to see the NDP getting behind a tax break for Canadians over the holidays on essential goods at the grocery store, kids' toys, Christmas trees, everything that will make this holiday season a little bit more merry and bright for Canadians. It's too bad the Conservatives won't stand up to do the same. especially given the fact that they campaigned on this in the last election. It's truly the height of hypocrisy, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure when Conservatives will get on board with actually supporting Canadians.
The honourable for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Madam Speaker, everyone should be able to afford a good home and to save for a rainy day. But people in Nanaimo, Ladysmith are struggling. They need permanent, not temporary relief. The Conservatives are a threat to this relief for those who need it most. They only want to get tax breaks for billionaires while everyday Canadians pay the price. And the Liberals have clearly let Canadians down. Will the Liberals give people in Nanaimo, Ladysmith the break they need to permanently remove GST off essentials? Yes or no?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Well, it's clear that the Liberal Party of Canada and our government believes in giving Canadians a break over the holidays. That relief will certainly save families money over the holidays. Much needed relief after the struggles that many workers and Canadians have gone through over the inflationary pressures that they've felt over many months. It's too bad that the Conservative Party of Canada just will not step up and support Canadians. They've obsessively harped in this House about giving Canadians tax breaks, and then when the opportunity arises, they will not step up to actually support Canadians.
The honourable member Niagara Falls.
Speaker, after 9 years of this failed NDP Liberal government, more and more Canadians are going hungry. They see the Liberal 2-month tax trick for what it is, nothing more than a lump of coal in their Christmas stockings. Exactly. 1 million people are visiting a food bank each month in Ontario, and in Niagara Falls, 120 families per day on average are visiting Project Share, our local food bank, because they cannot afford groceries. When will this NDP Liberal government axe the carbon tax to provide the permanent broad-based tax relief Canadians need and deserve?
Hear, hear.
The honourable minister.
Well, I've got some good news to share with that member, because just a few weeks ago, we signed an agreement with the province of Ontario for our national school food program. This means an additional 160,000 kids this school year will have access to healthy food at school. This is help for parents in a stressful and affordable or expensive time. And it ensures that kids can focus on being kids and can focus on learning. When will the Conservatives get on side and support these measures for families?
Hear, hear. Member from Niagara Falls.
Speaker, a 2-month Liberal tax trick does not provide the broad-based permanent tax relief Canadians need. And sadly, they plan to raise the carbon tax again next year. 1 in 7 residents in my community of Niagara Falls have visited Project Share. Almost 5,000 residents visited for the first time last year alone. Wow. Canadians need our help. They need permanent broad-based tax relief. Hear, hear. When will this government finally call a carbon tax election so we can scrap the tax?
Hear, hear.
The honourable minister.
I'd like to remind that member that the last time that they were in government, that the poverty rate for children was 16%, Madam Speaker. We have lifted hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty, and the single most effective measure in doing that is the Canada Child Benefit, ensuring parents have support each and every month to be able to afford the essentials for their family. And guess who voted against it? Guess who vows to dissolve it, Madam Speaker? The Conservatives.
Member for Calgary Centre.
Madam Speaker, the first thing a government has to get right is the basics. For Canadians, that's food and shelter. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, these costs are way up. Housing costs have doubled. Even more basic food costs continue to escalate, and food bank usage is up 90%. Let them eat cake is not an effective strategy. Escalating deficits are the root cause of inflation, and this government still does not get that. Reality is landing on the plates of Canadians. When will this government take a lesson and stop its economic mayhem?
The minister.
My colleague points to food and shelter as pressure points for Canadian households. I actually agree, but let's actually look at what the different parties are proposing to do about it. First, on food, he's complaining about the high price when he literally is voting against a tax break on food. He's literally opposing a national school food program which is helping hungry kids eat. Madam Speaker, when it comes to shelter, his own city is benefiting from hundreds of millions of dollars in investments directly to build homes more quickly, and he is supporting a leader who vows to cut that program. I won't take lessons from the Conservative Party, who cuts the very programs that put food on the table for families.
Member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This member keeps trying to talk about putting Band-Aids on the wounds his economic policies are causing. But step one is to reverse inflationary policies. Cancel the carbon tax that it hikes the price of food, fuel, and rent. Food inflation has skyrocketed by over 36% over the past 8 years. Higher deficits lead to higher inflation and a weaker Canadian dollar, leading to more inflation. This spending isn't free. Just ask the 2 million Canadians lining up at food banks. Time is up. When will this Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister.
It is hard to understand how a member whose city is receiving $228 million for housing considers that to be a Band-Aid solution. Does he think it is a Band-Aid solution that we are helping his city lead the country when it comes to converting office spaces to homes for Canadians? Does he think it is a Band-Aid solution that we are advancing a permanent program that's going to feed hungry kids in school? I have great respect for that honourable member. I love the city that he calls home, as it once provided a home to me. But it is difficult, once again, to accept questions on the cost of food and shelter from a member in a party who opposes the policies that make it easier to put food on the table for families and keep a roof over their head.
The honourable member from Montmagny-Lisle-Kamouraska-Rivière-du-Loup. Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government, the cost of living is unbearable. Canadians are living through an unprecedented crisis. And yet, what is the Bloc Québécois doing? It's betrayed Quebecers. It has voted for $500 million in spending. And this year, more than 33,000 Quebec children are asking for heartbreaking gifts at Christmas, like a winter coat, a lunchbox, or even a home for their family. In a country like Canada, this is shameful. Can the Liberal Bloc give Quebecers a break and stop supporting this Liberal Prime Minister who is constantly making people poorer? The Honourable Minister.
Member for the question. When I am out and about in my community talking to parents, I recently had a conversation with Olivier, who just had their fourth child, and he shared with me the impact of the Canada Child Benefit for his family. He shared with me the impact of affordable childcare, enabling both of them to go back to work. These are meaningful measures that we have taken to address affordability for Canadians, in which we continue to see the Conservatives oppose.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lisle-Kamouraska-Rivière-du-Loup. Madam Speaker, this Prime Minister's inflationary spending, supported by the Bloc Québécois, is crushing Canadians. Today, when Quebec children write to Santa, they are asking for heartbreaking items. Hundreds are asking for mittens and winter coats. It's horrifying. This should not be happening in a country like Canada. When will this Liberal Bloc stop harming Quebec families like this and stealing our children's dreams? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are hearing that we need to help families with affordability. That's why we've stepped in to help our children with school lunches and school meals. We've brought in a GST break. The Conservatives could vote with us on that. They could be telling their constituents who are suffering over the holidays that they will be supporting them. But on the contrary, they did the exact opposite. They voted against all these measures for our kids. The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille. Madam Speaker, the federal government doesn't even seem to know if our veterans are dead or alive. Imagine, 2 veterans discovered that the 2 sculptures have been made of them in a monument to honour veterans who have died in combat in Ontario. And out of 67 people in the monument, 12 of them are alive, and 4 of them never even served. A complaint was made, and their names have been removed from the plaque, but their image is still on the sculpture, standing among the dead. Will the minister finally get rid of this sculpture and apologize?
Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for raising this issue in this House. I can confirm the department has not provided funding to this specific project, and the VAC was not asked to validate the list of names featured on the memorial. That said, Veterans Affairs is in touch with the organization to rectify the matter, and we will. The Executive Director of Trees for Life has said this issue is a major priority to get this rectified, and we expect that this will be done swiftly and without delay. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Madam Speaker, they don't even seem to know what they spent money on or not. No one seems to have checked what the $2.9 million in 2019 was used for, even after the monument was unveiled in 2022, and there were Liberal MPs there. No one seemed to realize that they had paid for sculptures where living service members had been named among the list of the dead. These veterans had to complain in 2023, and yet, as late as Monday, the minister didn't seem to know anything about the situation. So 5 years later, these two sculptures show very clearly that this federal government is only a monument to incompetence. Will the minister get rid of these sculptures?
Madam Speaker, je peux confirmer que
Madam Speaker, I can confirm that the department did not grant money to this specific project and that Veterans Affairs Canada was not asked to verify the names on the memorial. That said, the department has reached out to the organization to rectify the situation, and I expect that to be dealt with without any further delay.
The honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister and his new BFF, the Maserati Marxists, have never been more out of touch. Their punishing carbon tax makes your gas, groceries and heating more expensive. The Carbon Tax Coalition has doubled housing costs, doubled rent, doubled mortgage payments, and doubled down payments for a home. Workers cannot afford to pay their rent or mortgages, and Canadians are out of money. When will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so we can axe the tax for good?
Again, I want to remind members to be judicial on the words that they use and not to use them to describe other members. The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I just want to clarify the record for everyone who's watching Question Period on a Friday morning that the coalition on carbon pricing actually fissured this year when the NDP abandoned their policy on carbon pricing. It is known as the most effective economic measure to bring down the price of pollution and also to boost economic activity. Witness the Canada Carbon Rebate to individuals, and now witness the Canada Carbon Rebate being applied to small businesses, as much as tens of thousands of dollars depending on the size of your business. It is an economic model that is proven in terms of the evidence and is a model that helps to bring down emissions. I would just hope that the NDP would get back on board.
The honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Madam Speaker, the government has killed small business, and it's all for the pension when it comes to the NDP. Next week, the NDP leader will be forced to vote on his own words. It's the ultimate test of who he is. Does he mean what he says, or are his words meaningless? He said he was ripping up the supply and confidence deal. We know it was a stunt before a by-election. The NDP leader gets his pension, the Prime Minister gets his power, Canadians get the bill. Stop the charade and the games. Call a carbon tax election now.
So just a reminder that the questions have to do with the administration of the House. And so I just want to remind members of that. Okay. That's not a question on the administration of the House. The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadian families are paying the price for the Prime Minister's inflationary carbon tax. Canada's food price report just revealed a family of 4 will spend $800 more on food in 2025. Food prices rose 36% faster in Canada than the United States. Taxing farmers, truckers, and ultimately families have driven millions of Canadians to food banks. And yet, the Liberals are hiking the carbon tax again. Will the Prime Minister finally give families some relief and cancel his punitive carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, 15 cents on a $100 bill. That's how small the impact of carbon pricing truly is. But when we offer Canadians a GST tax cut over the holidays, which is 100 times greater than that, the Conservatives oppose it. No heart. Conservatives demonstrate in this House every single day how they are not supporting Canadians. No heart. But this is truly a new height to their hypocrisy.
This NDP Liberal government, food bank usage is actually up 90%. Rising food costs driven by the carbon tax mean the average family will spend $16,800 on food next year. People who used to donate to food banks are now clients. Canadians are struggling, and yet the Prime Minister will quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Will the Prime Minister admit his failed policies and that are making food unaffordable and cancel the carbon tax so families can put food on their table?
Honourable Minister.
I challenge that member to point to a single thing that her party has done to help Canadians address affordability issues. Frankly, it's appalling, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we will continue to put forward measures like a GST holiday, like the Canada Child Benefit, to ensure that families have the support that they need through these expensive times while they continue to deny Canadians the support that they need.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Madam Speaker, it's disappointing that at a time when so many families are struggling to afford the basic essentials, we see the Conservatives voting against a GST tax cut. At Christmas, no less. And the Liberals, classic half measure not only doesn't put enough money back in people's pockets, it requires small businesses to change their prices twice in 2 months at the busiest time of year. Why won't the Liberals vote for our plan? Expand the GST tax cut, make it permanent, put more money back in people's pockets, and give small businesses a break. Why not?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, a GST tax break for Canadians over the holidays on essentials is going to make life more affordable for them for the next 2 months. That is good news for Canadians. It's great to see the NDP behind that proposal from the government. It's a shame that the Conservatives, who harp about cutting taxes for months and months and months and months in this House, for as long as I can remember, would actually stand up in this House and oppose a tax break for Canadians over the holidays. They're not serious, Madam Speaker. That's clear. All Canadians should wake up and realize that the Conservatives just won't be there to support them.
Port Moody Coquitlam.
More than half of women living on the streets are survivors of domestic violence. And women with disabilities are even more vulnerable because when they marry, the government claws back their disability benefits, making them choose between abuse or homelessness. The Liberals have let women with disabilities down, and we know what happened to support for women when Conservatives were in power. Cuts, cuts, and cuts. Will the Liberals stop their cruel and callous clawbacks that put women with disabilities in danger?
Yes, good question. The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, for the first time in Canada, there is a benefit designed to specifically help persons with disabilities, and of course it's going to help women with disabilities as well. This is a historic step, Madam Speaker, that we have put forward to address a long-standing poverty amongst working-age persons with disabilities. Like other progressive programs, we're going to make sure we continue to expand it to make sure all Canadians with disabilities, working-age Canadians with disabilities are supported, particularly some of the most vulnerable women. Thank you.
So before I go to the next question, I'm going to allow the honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake to re-ask his question because I hadn't heard the end of the question, but I do want to remind members that they should link their question to the administration of the House a little earlier in their question so that we know where this is heading. The honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
It's all about the pension, Madam Speaker. Next week, the NDP leader will be forced to vote on his own words. The ultimate test of who he is as a leader. Does he mean it or not? When he said he ripped up the supply agreement, it was just a stunt before a by-election. The NDP leader gets his pension, the Prime Minister gets his power, Canadians get the bill. It's time to call a carbon tax election, stop the charade, End the games. Call the election now.
So there was, I thought I hadn't heard quite the thing. There was actually no question in that comment. I'm not sure if anybody wants to respond to it at this point. So there's no response to it. The honourable member for St. John's East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today we remember the 14 young women who were killed during the École Polytechnique massacre. As the 16 days of activism to end gender-based violence comes to an end, we are reminded that our work must continue until we achieve a Canada free of gender-based violence. Could the Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth update Canadians on the work our government is doing to prevent gender-based violence?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, it's 35 years since the École Polytechnique massacre, where 14 women were gunned down simply because they were women. And this tragedy reminds us why we must stand against gender-based violence so we can prevent femicides. The greatest risk for intimate partner violence becoming lethal is a gun in the home. That's why we've banned more than 1,500 assault-style weapons, including the gun that was used at École Polytechnique. Yesterday, we banned an additional 324. On this side of the House, we will always prioritize the safety of women.
The honourable member Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
The NDP will once again sell out Canadians on Monday by refusing to stand by their own words, because here's the deal. The NDP leader gets his pension, the Prime Minister gets the power, and Canadians get the bill. And those bills are ever increasing when you look at the carbon tax that is going to be going up again on April the 1st, on their way to quadrupling it. And it was the Canada Food Price Report for 2025 that revealed just yesterday that an average family of 4 in Canada will pay $800 a year more in groceries next year. 2 million visits to a food bank. Why can't the Liberals and NDP just allow a carbon tax election to either quadruple it or allow Conservatives to axe it entirely?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, a lot of questions about what the NDP is doing in terms of supporting parliamentary process. Let me talk about one thing that is very salient for today. Today is December the 6th, the anniversary of 35 women being shot down in cold blood at the École Polytechnique. What the NDP is doing is supporting a bill on the floor of this chamber that will help tackle the root causes of violence against women. What am I talking about? I'm talking about radical misogyny that starts online. The Bill C-63 and the Online Harms Act help us target misogyny at its core. That is something that every member of Parliament needs to get behind, and we need to do it now because time is wasting about keeping women safe.
The honourable member for, Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
We stand in solidarity with the victims and their families as always, each and every year. The NDP, though, has to answer for what is going on the NDP motion, because he won't back up their own words by what they've said in just recent months. It was the NDP leader that said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. He said he ripped up the coalition agreement that's kept the Liberals in power, yet as soon as the stunt got over, he taped it back together and gave it back to the Prime Minister. So the question, Madam Speaker, for the Liberals is, will they work with the NDP finally and not quadruple the carbon tax, but allow Canadians to have their say in a carbon tax election, or are they too scared to what Canadians have to say to them?
Yeah. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the people of Canada have had their say on carbon taxes in the last election. In fact, the Conservative Party, when they were in power, passed a bill called the Fixed Date Election Bill. So they keep calling. They want us to break the law. We won't break the law. You can break the law. We're not that kind of people.
Just want to remind the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary he's to address questions and comments through the chair and not directly to the members. The Honourable Member for Kenora.
Madam Speaker, the government cannot be administered without the confidence of this House, and the NDP leader once said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for Canadians. And now, Madam Speaker, the NDP leader says that he's going to vote against his own words and in favour of propping up this Liberal government. A government that has doubled housing costs, that has caused 2 million Canadians to visit a food bank in a single month, and plans to quadruple the carbon tax, Madam Speaker. So instead, why don't they call a carbon tax election so that Canadians can choose between the costly coalition or our common sense plan to axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I will just point out for Canadians watching today that we've actually had 3 elections in a row on pricing pollution, on ensuring that no one in this country gets away with polluting for free. That was the 2015 election, the 2019 election, and the 2021 election, when that party had to campaign on pricing pollution themselves. What I would say is that it's proving dividends in terms of the Canadian economy. How is it doing so? Because we are returning more money to 8 out of 10 families through the Canada Carbon Rebate and through the Canada Carbon Rebate delivered to small businesses.
The honourable member Kenora.
Madam Speaker, that is simply not true, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed it. And we know that this NDP Liberal coalition is planning to hike taxes again next year. Despite the theatrical display of ripping up their confidence and supply agreement, Madam Speaker, this coalition is still alive and well. And even when Liberal MPs are calling for a new Prime Minister, this NDP leader is the only person that is keeping the Prime Minister in power. Once again, Mr. Speaker, instead, why don't they give Canadians a chance to vote in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Conservatives want to talk about confidence, Madam Speaker. You know what the Canadians can have confidence in? They can have confidence in our government to deliver programs and services that make their life more affordable, that contribute to their quality of life, like our early learning and childcare program. Jim Stanford, a very famous economist in this country, just did a report on the success of that program, that it's created 110,000 additional work opportunities for women and contributed $32 billion in GDP to the Canadian economy, and that's while saving Canadians 28% on average on their childcare costs. We are proving that you can invest.
For Caribou Prince George.
The honourable member for LaSalle Aymar Verdun. Madam Speaker, cycling in Montreal happens in winter and summer, at least when the federal government doesn't get in the way. Imagine the city offers to clear the snow from the bike path on the south side of the Lachine Canal at its own expense, but Ottawa refuses. Parks Canada doesn't have to make any effort, and yet it's too much to ask. On November 11th, the Southwest Borough passed a unanimous resolution asking Parks Canada to authorize snow removal. I also question the Minister of the Environment. Is he going to ask Parks Canada to get out of the way?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci, Madame. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. First, that is a point for the municipal government. It's a municipal issue. Once again, Madam Speaker, well, if there is opportunity after question period, I'd be very happy to speak with that colleague on this issue. But for me, this is clearly a municipal issue. The honourable member for LaSalle Aymar Verdun. Madam Speaker, Parks Canada is federal, and the citizens of Southwest aren't asking for too much. They simply want snow-cleared access to downtown. The city would do the work, and the city would foot the bill. Parks Canada has yet to disclose a single well-documented fact or reason for its staggering refusal. The Minister of the Environment is himself a fan of active transportation. He too must think it makes no sense. With Montreal already snowed under, will the Minister of the Environment and the member for Ville-Sainte-Marie finally settle this issue? Madam Speaker, what I'd like to underscore that on this side of the House, we are promoting active transit, jogging, walking, and people who ride their bikes at Montreal, Toronto, across Canada. If he wants to discuss this more after question period, we would be comfortable talking about how we can help the city of Montreal with their job of removing snow from bike paths. Thank you.
Remember Caribou Prince George?
The Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for the people. Who said that? The Twitter-tough Maserati Marxist sellout NDP leader. He popped up his chest, stomped his feet, yet he chooses the Prime Minister over Canadians each and every time. He's the only one propping up this government. He's complicit in every Liberal scandal and every failed policy. On Monday, will he vote for a carbon tax election, or will he once again put his pension before Canadians?
So that question definitely has no relevance to the administration of the House, and I want to ask members I want to ask members to please not be yelling out when others are speaking. The honourable member for Caribou Prince George, and it has to be with the administration of the House, or else I will cut him off and we'll go to another question. The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Madam Speaker, they're weak, they're desperate, and the only reason why they're in power is because of the NDP leaders too selfish and too beholden to the Prime Minister to support his own motion made up of entirely his own words. They voted 24 times to quadruple the carbon tax. The Costly Coalition has doubled housing costs, doubled rent, doubled mortgage payments. But on Monday, they all have an opportunity. Will the NDP leader put the people above his pension?
Sorry, again, the honourable member is not being relevant to the administration of the House. We are going to move on, and next time, the next question for the members will be cut. He was asking the question. Does the honourable member, is it relevant to the administration of the House?
Asking for a carbon tax election. Is that not relevant to the administration of the House?
The honourable member? The honourable member will finish his question, and if it's not relevant, then the next question will be passed on. The honourable member.
Madam Speaker, they're weak, they're desperate, and the only reason why they're in power today is because of the Maserati Marxist NDP leader, who's too selfish, too beholden to the Prime Minister to support a motion made up entirely of his own words.
Member to read his whole question. If he can just finish the question at the bottom, please.
Madam Speaker, on Monday, we have an opportunity. Will the NDP vote for a motion to call a carbon tax election?
Again, it's got nothing to do with the administration of the government. The honourable member, and if this continues, the honourable members will end up losing a question. The honourable member for Bow River.
Thank you. The leader of the NDP says he ripped up his coalition agreement with the Prime Minister, calling him weak, selfish, and beholden to corporate interests. Conservatives agree. The NDP leader can prove it by putting his pension where his mouth is and vote non-confidence in this Prime Minister. After 9 years of the NDP Liberal coalition, housing, rent have doubled, and they will quadruple the carbon tax, driving up the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. Will the government give the Canadians relief they need by calling a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, a lot of us are struggling to understand the nature of today's question period, but I think I've discerned what it is. The official opposition seems to be off their game because they're not using a lot of three-word slogans. And because of that, it's actually destabilized the House. What I can say simply about housing is that we support housing, and we support the housing accelerator that I think 17 members of the official opposition advocated for before they were told not to by their leader. Secondly, we support the fight for the environment, and we will continue to advocate for making sure pollution is not free, and we will participate and work with any party that wants to support us in that endeavour, because it supports the environment.
The honourable member for Humber River Black Creek.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Well, the holiday season is fast approaching, which means many Canadians will soon be celebrating with family and friends. But what we also know is what Canadians are getting in their Christmas stockings this year from the Leader of the Opposition. Broken campaign promises and hypocritical speeches, and more of that. Could our Minister please tell the House what we're going to do to support Canadians this winter?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for her question, her incredible work, and her leadership. Last week, this House voted to give Canadians a real break by eliminating GST on essential goods. This means that ready-to-eat meals, children's clothing, toys, books, and Christmas trees will not be taxed this holiday season. Now, Canadians across this country will benefit from real relief at the checkout. Now, unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition decided to do what he normally does and put partisan interest ahead of helping Canadians and voted against removing a tax. Can the Leader of the Opposition explain to Canadians why he decided to act like a Grinch this Christmas?
So again, questions and comments have to do with the administration of the government, and it's not to ask. He asked the question to the Leader of the Opposition. The honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the facts don't lie. The leader of the NDP with this Prime Minister voted for the carbon tax 24 times, and they will do it again next week. This leader of the NDP, along with the Prime Minister, will quadruple the carbon tax in the spring. He's the one who created the coalition agreement with this government that has doubled mortgages, doubled housing prices, and has sent 2 million Canadians to food banks. So this coming Monday, the leader of the NDP has a decision. Will he continue to prop up this Prime Minister for his pension, or will he call a carbon tax election?
So again, I would just, it's very clear that individuals are playing with words and that these questions are not to do with the administration of the government. You cannot ask a leader of another party or other members to respond to these questions. It should be to the administration of the government and to the government to respond. The honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore, I hope that her other question is related to the administration and is asked to the government. Otherwise, the honourable member will I will have to cut her off. The honourable member Calgary-Midnapore.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Well, just over 3 months ago, the leader of the NDP ripped up the agreement he had with the government. He had the agreement with the government, Madam Speaker. He said that the Prime Minister was too weak, too selfish, too beholden to corporate interests to fight for Canadians. So this coming week again, on Monday, Madam Speaker, the leader of the NDP has an opportunity again to decide if he will prop up this government again or not. Is he going to prop up the Prime Minister or allow Canadians?
Again, the honourable member knows full well, I just warned her, and she knows full well that she's not to ask questions of another opposition during question period. She is supposed to ask the government questions. And so this has been going on for quite some time. I would just ask members to please make sure that their preamble has more to do with the work of the government so that we know that it's going in the right direction, or at least that their end of their question has to do with the government and the administration of the government. The honourable member for... sorry.
The minister wants to respond.
Oh, I see that the minister still wants to respond. The honourable minister.
Well, I think what's really important is to focus on some of the issues. And one of the issues that Canadians are rightfully asking about this House is about the concern about foreign interference and things such as how do we target foreign interference. What I find fascinating is that we've had a lot of discussions about the leader of the NDP. That leader has actually had the courage to get a security clearance and get a briefing to help to protect this country. In fact, there's only one member of a party that has not done exactly that, and that is the leader of the official opposition. For a man who would purport to assume and want the highest job in this country, I find it actually quite appalling that he doesn't have the courage to work on getting a clearance, getting a briefing, and protecting this country.
The honourable for Regina, Wascana.
The fact is the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Those are the words of the NDP leader who continues to betray Canadians by propping up this failed Liberal government. The leader of the party that used to represent workers now props up a government that raises the carbon tax, makes homes unaffordable.
Sorry, I want to ask members to please settle down and please extend the respect to the House to the person who has the floor. I will find out soon enough what the question is, and we'll go from there. And if this continues, as I said, we will have to go into a practice of pulling questions from those who are who are trying to pose questions. The honourable member for Regina, Wascana.
The leader of the party that used to represent workers now props up a government that raises the carbon tax, makes homes unaffordable, has lost control of the deficit, and lets crime run loose on our streets. On Monday's vote, will the Prime Minister continue to hide behind the NDP, or will he finally call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, it's a shame that the opposition still hasn't figured out to ask a question on the administration of government business. But while I'm on my feet, I might as well, Madam Speaker, speak about what happened yesterday at the Public Safety Committee, where there was pretty shocking testimony about foreign interference in the Conservative election race, confirming that the member from Calgary Nose Hill, in fact, received an angry phone call from the Indian consulate and brought that forward to Mr. Brown's leadership campaign, where they, in fact, changed his language to make the Indian consulate happy. Why aren't Conservatives talking?
The Honourable Member for St. John Rothsay.
Madam Speaker, good thing this question period's almost over. Let's try this. Last week, on the first day of Christmas, the Leader of the Opposition showed an amazing level of hypocrisy. When this House voted to give Canadians a break, the Leader of the Opposition decided to vote against it, despite running on it in the last election. Can the Minister explain why providing tax relief for Canadians during the holidays will move our economy forward? And everybody have a great weekend, and let's relax.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, I want to thank the member from St. John Rothsay for the question. The hypocrisy of the Conservative leader is absolutely shocking. Get this, during the last election campaign, all Conservative candidates campaigned on a promise to lift the GST during the holiday season. And what did they do last week when presented with the opportunity to follow through on that promise? Well, guess what? They broke their promise to Canadians by voting against a GST break over the holidays. I don't know what the Leader of the Opposition is planning on serving at Christmas dinner, but I sure hope it's better than the stale slogans and horrendous hypocrisy that he's been serving up in this.
The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
Here is how a government question is asked. Hunters and trappers in Nunavut rely on their boats to feed their families. 3 years ago, this government promised a small craft harbor for Arctic Bay. 3 years later, this government has not delivered. This harbor would allow more safe hunting and help keep our communities safe from threats in the Arctic. I have fought for this project, and this Liberal government is still ignoring my community. With the government's new Arctic foreign policy released today, will the Liberals finally fund this important project?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and Canadian Coast Guard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it is so refreshing today to hear an actual question presented to the government. I want to thank the member for doing so. I will say this, that when it comes to small craft harbors, it's the lifeblood of every community in terms of economic development, in terms of social development. And I look forward, I want to learn more about the particular question at hand, and I'm committed to meeting the member, as we all should do, in a collegial way, in a clear way, and in an unoffensive way, like we're hearing today.
Hear, hear. Order, 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 order. The Honourable Member for South Shore, St. Margaret's, and the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, I ask them to please behave. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I put the
Honourable Member just muted herself, I believe. Okay, the Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question today is that as we see the days dwindling to when we can actually pass legislation, my constituents are particularly concerned with Bill C-33. It's on rail safety and management of marine issues around our ports. It was first introduced 2 ministers of transportation ago, more than 2 years ago, when the minister was from the member from Mississauga, Arundel. Can the government update us? We've finished clause by clause. We're waiting for report stage. When will this bill come back so we can at least get it to the Senate, or we have a hope of not losing years worth of work?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Actually, I agree with the member. We have been in the House here for over a month now, bogged down by the Conservatives with respect to their privilege motion. Once we can get by that, we can get back to the order of business here in the House, something that most, if not all, members are looking forward to. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I'll do the point of order in a minute. So two things. First, following discussions among